Surface prep, as Brian was saying earlier from BASF, surface prep is key. You guys all know that, being ICRI members, that prep is the key when you're doing repair work. That work that's done up front, as far as making sure the substrate is ready to receive the coatings or the patching material, is key to your success. No different with our stuff. You want a nice fractured aggregate profile when you're patching, and want to have an SSD. SSD is a term that drives me crazy, because the last part of that term says dry, and when you get guys that are new to the industry, or they might be concrete guys that aren't in the restoration business, they go, oh yeah, before I patched that substrate, we dried it out with a blower and it was dry before we patched. So we've got one of our guys that likes to say saturated surface damp, where we're trying to instill on you that the key is we're trying to fill those pores with water. We don't want to have puddles, but we want that saturated so it doesn't steal water from the bond line of the repair, where it's most important that we get a good adherence of the material to the substrate. So we're going to always do that. And then on the horizontal stuff, scrub coat's not required for doing deck work. You can do it when you're doing more of a restoration type job on a balcony or whatever, with scrubbing in. And again, with a scrub coat, you don't want to wet out the material. You want to use the same consistency of material that you're going to patch with. You're not adding more water or adding more admixture or latex, bonding agent to the material to make it soupier, because then you're lowering that water cement ratio, and you're still weakening that bond line. So you always want to use scrubbing the consistency of the material you're ready to use first, and then patch on it wet on wet. You don't want to let that bond coat dry out before the repair gets laid on top. So we'll start with the Repcon 928. I'm not going to do the surface prep today. We're just going to pour it into. We've got some wooden boxes or wooden trays made up, just so we can show you, put that down. But normally we'd be saturating with a Tampico brush, or some way to get it wet down. Some guys will use for the scrub coat a sponge floater, or they'll cut the tips off of a masonry brush so it's easier to scrub with. But that's the standard for getting everything prepped out. You obviously always add powder to the liquid when you're mixing, but you get a lot more shear. Repcon 928 it's got some fluidifiers and super plasticizers that are dry in the bag. And so a lot of guys, if they're mixing by eye, they mix for a half a minute or a minute, and they're like, oh, this needs some more water, let's hit it again. And then all of a sudden the material's got too much water in it. All these repair mortars are designed for a specific water demand, and you're not supposed to go over that. The shear of a good mixer, whether it's a hand mixer like this one, or the one Brian was using earlier today, or if you're using a mortar mixer with blades, those are the ideal things. You want to create that shear so that you're getting the wetting action of the admixtures that are dry in the bag. So we've got 5 pints of water. The demand on this one is 4 3/4 to 5 1/4 is the max. I've got 5 pints in here now. We're going to mix up, and I've got a little bit of water held out in case we need to adjust. Repair mortars normally that have these the plasticizers, 3 minutes is a lifetime without a wash. So when you're mixing for 3 minutes, when I first filled this up, it looks like there's no way it's going to wet out. And I'm just watching it here over 30 seconds or so, you're starting to see that super plasticizer kick in, and the material starts to loosen. Run out the low end of the hole. These are kind of a neat little trick that one of our reps up in New York invented. These are called bucket brackets. And any of you that have ever torn up your shins on a bucket handle know that something like that's pretty cool to hold, especially if you're mixing, epoxy grout or epoxy mortars that are heavy. So with all mortars, you normally want to, place with a straight edge or with a mag float first. You don't want to seal the surface just like regular ready mix concrete. You don't want to seal the surface before you've gotten some bleed up, because then you'll get blistering with, with concrete or repair materials when you do that. our spec film is an evaporation reducer, but it doubles as a finishing aid on repair mortars. So when you're placing repair mortars over large areas, instead of blessing with water or wetting your trowel down with water, just putting a little bit of our evaporation reducer spec film on there. It breaks the surface tension and just really moves nice and smooth across. Material for getting a nice finish on it. You know, normally on a bridge deck, they're not getting too fancy with this. It's screed it into place, get a quick broom finish on it, and leave it alone. But this doubles great for, like I said, balcony restoration and repair, industrial, like a joint rebuild in an industrial warehouse where the joints have failed because they weren't properly filled. And it gives you quick turnaround time, whether you're patching a manhole surround, whether you're doing a deck patch or an industrial patch. So that's the Repcon 928.
Keith, can you talk a little bit about working time and early street game and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so this material at 75, you have 30 minutes of work time, which is a lot more than some of our competitors, but then once it goes into final set, it rockets off from there. You know, obviously with hot weather, cold weather, you can add hot water or add cold water to change the set time characteristics of mortars. Even just keeping powders in the shade in the summertime, even if it's a blue tarp that's 6 inches over the pallet, it hugely makes a difference as far as the heat of that. If that material is 90 degrees and your water's 85 degrees, you're going to have shorter work time with that. But within several hours, you're in the 4,000 PSI range. Like I said, you can coat this with a non-breathing coating in 24 hours.
What about cure?
Pardon me? Cure on bridge. Good question. We don't require curing on bridge decks. We generally do cure. We'll just use like the DOT curing compound because it's always breezy and sunny on a bridge deck. But it is a self-curing material. It doesn't necessarily require it. But on bridge decks, they're doing it in an open finish where it's a light screed finish and then a broom finish, and so you're losing more mixed water to the surface there. Good question there. And then the other thing that guys don't understand too is that spec film in new construction actually acts like a pre-cure. It creates an alcohol web or a monomolecular film on top of the concrete that locks that mixed water in and holds it and protects the concrete while the concrete's still plastic. And I mean, it's very inexpensive per square foot. I mean, we've got guys everywhere from residential sidewalk guys to doing super flat floors that live and die by using evaporation reducer on everything that they pour. So it doubles as that finishing aid, but does a great job as being like a pre-cure that protects that concrete while it's still plastic. Ultimate strength on this material is up in the 10,000 PSI range. We sell a tremendous amount of it here in the Carolinas for DOT work. Sister product of this, the FS, which has a faster initial set. We sell a lot in the New York City boroughs and the Port Authority in New York. Contractors just absolutely love it, and that's one of the most challenging markets in the country as far as if you aren't ready to pull the cones in New York City when traffic time starts at the Holland Tunnel and the Lincoln Tunnel, you're in deep trouble. So you got to have that ready to go. So here, we've just kind of screeded this a little bit just to kind of give you an idea. You can just see that this really acts as a nice trowel glide on any sticky, and these aren't really sticky, but any kind of a sticky repair mortar, a little bit of the spec film really goes a long way as far as being able to get a tight finish on something. So that's that one. The next one